Look out, something is going to get you tonight. Let's talk about the thing that's going to get you tonight.
Welcome to the Happy Harvest Horror Show.
Not even just the art itself, it's always constantly reminding you that you're going to die, kid. One day you're really gonna kick the bucket. And my whole childhood just spent like that. We would have theology in class every week. We would have mass on Fridays. We would go to church on Sunday. Like, Catholicism was my life, growing up. And so much of it is about preparing yourself for the next life, and that your body doesn't matter. It's just a vessel really for sin that you need to shed one day, so then you can ascend into heaven. And so all growing up, I'm already being fed this like dance macabre of imagery, that is
right.
Death waltz through life. And then I get to college and I'm like, oh wait, maybe it's not so bad,
Well, and which is kind of crazy, because that's sort of an anti-Catholic idea that your body doesn't matter, right? Like part of the Catholic preoccupation with like bodies, and like with this gets into like policing people's bodies, especially women's bodies, is the belief in like the presence of God, like in living things, and like things aren't just symbolic, like it's actually, everything is much more incarnate than it is transcendent.
Catholics love relics.
Yes, yeah, like everything is endowed with meaning and purpose, and it should be dealt with, as if it's important.
Yeah, just kind of speaking on the omnipresent reminders of death. Like, I feel like that actually connects back to the beginning of the episode. Like, I've been told this by lots of people, especially through like my other podcast, because we actually talk a lot about like memento mori and death and stuff. I have been told by a lot of people that just the way I talk about death makes them feel a lot more comfortable with death. And that's a really nice thing to hear. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. That's an incredibly nice thing to hear, but it's just very natural to me. Because I think I just grew up with this very omnipresent, like, oh, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
I came to terms with that at an incredibly young age. I have another personal story. I remember being 6 or 7, and there was one time I was like hanging out with my little cousin who was 2 years younger than me, and she wasn't Catholic because this was a cousin on my mom's side. I was just like hanging out with my little cousin. I'm like 7 years old, and my cousin didn't understand that she was gonna die.
No.
And I felt the need to explain that.
Oh my god, I love that.
Listen, kid.
As
you're smoking a cigarette.
Yeah. Let me tell you.
I was just very much like, hold on a minute. You need to understand this.
I mean, we talk about like how things were like kind of dark and like maybe it wasn't technically appropriate, but also I'm not going to say that we weren't better off for facing those things earlier.
Oh yeah, which then constantly leads back into this is why we're spooky, because we've already faced it earlier on, and that
we've internalized it already.
Yeah, that then seeing maybe a scary thing later on in life, it's like, oh no, I already processed that. That's just cool,
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that I can necessarily attribute this to being Catholic, but being a very small child, like watching The Wizard of Oz, everybody's always like, oh my gosh, The Wizard of Oz is so traumatizing. Like, the flying monkeys are so scary. The Wicked Witch is so scary. And I'm like, what? I was like, I was obsessed with the Wicked Witch of the West. And the flying monkeys, are you kidding me? I was like, that's the coolest part of the whole thing. Like, what do you mean you related to Dorothy? Like, no, absolutely not. Like, I have pictures of me I have pictures of me as a toddler, like, wearing a black polo shirt that was like oversized on me, and a black witch's hat with a broom, like standing in front of the TV while that show is on.
Amazing.
Totally.
And like gargoyles are so cool, and that's such a Catholic thing.
Yeah. No, I definitely think at a really really young age, we kind of started to face mortality, and
we were metal as fuck.
Everyone has their own journey and whatever. I'm not saying one is like better than the other, but like if anyone is like wow, you seem really comfortable with death. It's like, yeah, I've been comfortable with it my entire life. Like, there's nothing, it's not new to me. Like, it's not.
Yeah. Once a day, every year, we have Ash Wednesday, where we walk around for a full day with ash on our foreheads after being told you are ash and ash to you will return. I'm like, cool. I'm gonna fucking wear this with pride all day.
Yeah, Brian, to your point about like realizing, you brought up that quote from that article about the fish are the last to discover the sea. Mm-hmm. I remember being in high school and a friend of mine being over after school on Ash Wednesday. And I was like, okay, Jimmy, we're gonna go to mass, so like you have to go home. And he was like, can I go to mass with you guys? And my mom was like, sure, you can come. And I was like, he's gonna come on Ash Wednesday? Like, of all the days for him to experience a Catholic mass, perhaps for the first time. And so that was the first time that I was like, really, like every single little thing that we did, even things that were just like a normal, because most of that mass is pretty normal. I was just totally seeing it from an outsider perspective, and I was like, this is so bizarre. Mm-hmm. It felt like suddenly culty to me. Yeah. And I felt kind of wrong about it because I just felt like I was totally seeing it through his eyes. And not that he was being as judgmental about it as I was, I'm sure. I think I was just feeling self-conscious suddenly that I was like, this would seem so weird if you have no frame of reference for this and are not used to doing this every single week. Yeah. And on top of that, It's Ash Wednesday. And then I had to like coach him on like what he needed to do to go up. I was like, okay, so you're not Catholic. You're not going to get ashes on your forehead. Just cross your arms in front. I had to like, I was so stressed. I
mean, I remember being as a kid and watching people go up and crossing their arms. I'm like, whoa, what's wrong with you? Do you not believe it? Like there was looking back, like that was a real culty thing that I had this real judgment of being like, why did you cross your arms? Why are you even here?
Yeah.
Ash Wednesday. I feel like that was actually when prepping for this episode, the first thing that came to my mind, like, why does Catholicism make you spooky? Is like fucking Ash Wednesday. Like, first off, kind of connecting once again back to the witchcraft thing, you're literally walking around all day with a sigil on your forehead. Like, it is a magic symbol made of ash on your forehead. Not only that, but that symbol represents a very brutal murder of someone. Right. Like the cross represents death, not only death, but the murder of, our Messiah. Like it represents the murder of someone. And so you're walking around all day with a sigil made of ashes on your forehead. Brian, you mentioned it's literally one of my favorite quotes. I bring it up all the time. Like the from ash.
Thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fucking metal, dude.
I love Ash Wednesday.
Return, man. Like it's like the whole thing. It's the circle of life, right? And that part of Ash Wednesday, right? It was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And not only that, we are going to die one day. It's peppered into so many songs, so many Christian rock songs, everything, but that you do not know the hour or the day. That like you always have to be ready because watch your back. It's going to get you.
I think about that all the time.
It also, I think, speaks to the beauty of it too, though, because there is this like, it is dark, obviously, but also like to me, the concept of like, it's not only about returning to ash. It's like, that's what I once was, right? So there's like this cycle of life thing. Like I was Ash, and now I'm Corrie the human person, and then I will be Ash again.
And that's what I was getting about earlier, about how it feels like there's this paradox where your body, it's temporary. It's only here for now, and then your soul is forever, though. And so like we have to spend our life really not being sure not to give over to earthly pleasures. You have to steel yourself for higher pleasures of heaven, and that's what I think I was getting at with the body doesn't matter in a way.
So this is also interesting. I feel like Catholicism gets kind of complicated because that
do tell
complicated. No, dude, it's pretty straightforward.
It's very clear. No, because that is definitely part of it. That is definitely part of what was preached, at least in my Catholic upbringing. And it is real. But also, like, Catholicism is, like, Catholics are not Puritans.
No.
Like, Catholics in general like to have a good time. They like to drink a lot of the time. Like I said, we were small children being given wine. Like, Catholicism is also built on decadence. It's built on these beautiful churches full of beautiful art and stained glass and like all of these things. And so there is this element of, yeah, you got to kind of watch yourself because like you want to go to heaven and whatever, but like also Catholicism does not align with the puritanical, like, starve yourself of pleasures.
Yeah, 'cause
even though they say they do, I feel like this is, oh my gosh, it's how many contradictions can you find in the Bible for 1,000
Right.
reasons?
Yeah.
Because you have these grandiose churches, but then we're singing songs like "Blessed are the meek at heart" and "Forever the poor," and we'll always give to them. And also, here's this great big fucking building we got, and we spent all our money into it. Let's drink from golden chalices. But just remember that blessed are the meek, and you know, it's this like that's what really kind of drove me out when I was in high school. That I'm like, guys, you got to stick to one thing because you are you are talking about a whole lot of different things all at once.
Yeah,
Right.
there's contradictions galore,
Yeah.
for sure. And that's from a, just intellectual perspective. Like at some point you have to be like, wait, what? Like, like what are we trying to say here? I don't know. I guess that's like something that as I got older and I would start to spend more time with friends of mine in high school when I wasn't in Catholic school anymore and I had friends that were like Protestants and stuff, I started to realize how chill the Catholic Church was about some things and how not chill the Protestant Church was about some things.
Yeah.
And that got really complicated
Yeah.
too. Catholicism definitely has a darkness to it that other Christian denominations don't. Catholicism also has a decadence to it that other Christian denominations don't, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's much more like sensual.
Yes, it's so sensual.
Yeah, and it's
Yes,
well, and again, it's embodied. I feel like Catholicism emphasizes the presence of God in the world and the presence of God in people and in things and events, and like God is revealed through his creation. And I feel like Protestants stress how the world that we live in and the people that we surround ourselves with are unlike God, and that God is removed from the world, and that we are never worthy and are therefore trying to transcend this
get
world,
there, yeah.
get to a place that's more perfect, because God has sort of abandoned this imperfect creation, and you're constantly working to try to better yourself so that you're worthy of him. Whereas Catholics, it's like, no, God like infused his creation with himself. He's deemed it worthy. He's deemed you worthy. That's why all of these things on earth have such importance, and that's why all this stuff matters, because it's all part of it.
yes, definitely. And then that, like, I don't know, that interestingly connects to almost like a low-key like hedonism.
Yeah, that's why the sex thing gets weird. Because if you follow that logic, then you sort of have to believe that, like, okay, well then human sexual relationships therefore are revealing something about creation and therefore the creator, and they therefore must be good. But we have this weird puritanical resistance to it, that like sex is dirty, but which I think has more to do with patriarchy being a construct that works within the church, and that being used as a mechanism to control people. And that has less to do with like the actual beliefs that it's founded on, and more to do with pushing up a political patriarchal agenda that doesn't have anything to do with the actual revelation of God.
Tell me more about that, because I feel like that never happens in the church.
Brian, I will send you this book. There's this great book that I read called The Catholic Imagination.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It's by
Can
Andrew.
I get a copy of
Yes.
that? Sounds-
We're going to give all our readers a copy of this.
It's
book.
like one of the only books that I ever have highlighted in, by Andrew Greeley, who has passed away a few years ago, but he was a Catholic priest and he was a professor at some colleges, and he also wrote lots of fiction too. But it's just about how sort of like how growing up Catholic informs your imagination and informs your belief system. And actually they used at the Met Gala, when it was Heavenly Bodies, right? That exhibit.
It was so cool.
Yeah. So they use a quote from the introduction of the book. It's the first paragraph of the book. It was like splashed on the wall at the beginning of the exhibit. And the quote was, Catholics live in an enchanted world, a world of statues and holy water, stained glass windows and votive candles, saints and religious medals, rosary beads and holy pictures. but these Catholic paraphernalia are merely hints of a deeper and more pervasive religious sensibility which inclines Catholics to see the holy lurking in creation. As Catholics, we find our houses and our world haunted by a sense that the objects, events, and persons of daily life are revelations of grace.
I love
That's so
that.
good.
It's the fact that this book is written by a Catholic priest, and then he's really like the chapter that deals about sex is called Sacred Desire, and the picture for the picture at the chapter heading is of Bernini's Saint Teresa in Divine Ecstasy. So it looks like Saint Teresa's like having an orgasm,
Right.
in this marble sculpture by Bernini, and it's oh my gosh, it's so good. But he just talks about that sort of contradiction, like, okay, based on what we believe as Catholics, we should therefore have this attitude towards sex and sexuality, and yet
And
we don't.
yet. That's
No,
fascinating.
totally. And I think there's just a weird mixture of Catholicism meets early American puritanical values. I think they meet each other somewhere.
When they should be so opposed.
Yeah, and that's kind of speaking to more, Brian, what you were talking about, the like Catholic guilt and like these more complicated ideas of feeling bad about, just earthly pleasures or bodily desires and things like that. But in a lot of ways, I think Catholicism really indulges in those things. And it has just, in our experience as the three of us, I think it's also important to say, not only did we grow up Catholic, we grew up Catholic in the United States.
Yes.
All with connections to the Midwest United States.
Yes.
Yeah.
That means something.
Yes.
There is something about this area that Protestant work ethic is sewn into everything. And Protestant ethics are sewn into, I think, probably even our Catholicism,
Totally.
So like
In ways that we don't even realize.
exactly. So I think Catholicism at its core is a very decadent, very celebratory religion that also just has this layer of shame that has been created specifically from more puritanical mindset.
Yeah.
At its core, Catholicism is about art. It's about architecture. It's about wine and bodies and having these. Yeah, I love that you brought up Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Like, it's such a beautiful sculpture, and her having this spiritual experience that very much mirrors a sexual experience, right?
And and knowing that, like, there's no way that Bernini sculpted this not thinking that the people who are going to look at this are going to imagine an orgasm. Like, that's going to be their point of connection to this. To believe that he doesn't know what he's doing is naive.
Yeah, exactly. No, he knew exactly what he was doing. 100%. And yeah, there is this great contradiction, right? There is definitely this great contradiction in Catholicism of bringing all these things to the forefront and basically bringing all these thoughts and ideas and images into our minds at incredibly young ages, and then also like telling us that certain aspects of them are wrong or that we should feel shame about them.
Yeah, not even to some, I think a lot. I mean, just the idea of sin and how pervasive it is in so many things, in so many areas of your life, that you're, even at a young age, we're told to then more often the better, but to confess all of these, what we're told are sins to this strange man at a church, you just have to like suddenly become super vulnerable to this unknown person in a way, and basically list all the ways that you've been bad, and that you're always basically kind of keeping a log in your head and evaluating yourself all the time. And like, am I living the best life? Am I on the right path? Am I on the righteous, journey? And it's so at odds with the decadent, like what you're saying, all these different beautiful imagery in this grandiose place that almost shames you for enjoying it in its fullest, humanly bodily way, if that makes sense.
I will say that the most, I guess, if I had to categorize any of my Catholic upbringing as traumatic, the traumatic experiences would have been in confession. Mm-hmm. And at the time, they seemed full of catharsis. And I'm not saying that catharsis wasn't real, but leading up to it, there was such a degree of trepidation. It was like the most stressful thing of all time. It was like worse than going to the doctor knowing that you were going to get a shot or a vaccine. Yep. And like that sort of like huge emotional stress on like someone who like you really haven't probably done anything. Like I wasn't killing anybody, but whatever it was that I felt guilty about suddenly all had this sort of crushing weight that it probably did not deserve. And then to then have that lifted off of you felt so amazing. But looking back, I'm thinking, should I have even felt crushed under that weight to begin with?
No, and I think that even that the ritual of going to confession, there's shame built into it too, with the confessional booth, that you can sit and really have this level of animosity that you're behind a screen because there's
which I never did though.
I never did either because there was this other level of you have to face what you're doing instead of hide behind your shame, like. But it definitely always had that avenue available to you if you wanted to hide, and. Yeah, like the whole thing, I think, was pretty destructive in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Completely agree with everything you both said, because I definitely had that same like fear leading up to reconciliation that like led to shame, and it was a whole thing.
It led to the dark side, and now you're Seth Lord.
I definitely think there is a trauma there, and so I totally agree. I'm also just going to kind of add something that I have come to recognize about reconciliation as an adult that I do respect about that sacrament and that experience. The way it was built up, especially I think for us, whatever, in the 90s, it was just like the way it was like, it was scary. It was scary to have to go and tell someone what you done wrong. I swear every time I went to reconciliation, I just told them that like I lied to my parents. Cause like that was something I was pretty sure I had done, like all kids lie to their parents.
I almost wish I had made shit up.
You had to come up with something. You knew you had done something wrong, but you didn't really know what. So you'd like come up with something. And there's a weird trauma and a shame with that. But as an adult and looking back on reconciliation, I likewise think there is something beautiful about the concept of I can take this moment, I can sit down, I can say some things that maybe I did wrong. And then I can, be given a penance or whatever, and I can take a few moments to say some words, say a prayer, sit and experience God, and then I can be forgiven of everything. And that aspect, I think, is very beautiful because that was something about reconciliation too, was like, you weren't expected to remember everything you did wrong. You were just expected to remember, like to say what you could remember. And then after the whole sacrament, you were forgiven and you could be free of it. And
it wasn't punitive. It's meant to release you.
Exactly. So if there's more focus placed on this idea of I take this moment and I take it as a moment of like penance or whatever, and after it, I am free. That I think is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I would enjoy it much more now as an adult. I would get much more out of it now.
Right? I think I would
because also things that I felt bad about as a child or even as a teenager, I'd be like, okay, that's not really sinful. You just felt guilty doing that.
Yeah, totally. So it's also, I think maybe that's something I think we probably all shared is like all of these things are being thrust upon us as small children in ways that, we weren't able to fully appreciate or understand, so it was kind of traumatizing.
If I can steer us back a little bit to the spooky nature of things. So in thinking about Catholicism and in thinking about the way that it emphasizes the presence of God in the world that we live in, in the objects that we encounter, in the people and in the things, it also then begs the question, how present is the devil in the world? And I feel like that's
such a big question.
It's such a big question. And I don't know how much the two of you thought about the devil growing up. I certainly was like, why don't we talk about him more? I was upset. I was upset really that I was like, why is it only during Lent that we talk, we have the story of Jesus in the desert being tempted by the devil. I was like, he should be a bigger character in this book, like he seems like a big deal, and he doesn't show up very much.
Right.
But then obviously it's a great archetype for horror, and we'll never get tired of it, and I certainly will never get tired of it. But yeah, I just wonder about like the eminence of the devil in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the personification of sin, that he's the tempter, the orchestrator of all end times, that's coming, and that you always have to you keep an eye out for him.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that because it's all this imagery also of death and macabre, but there's so much imagery of hell too in Catholic art. And I mean, just even looking back, and it's not new. I mean, going back to the Middle Ages with the morality plays and like the Passion plays, they would put on actual big hell mouths. They would make it was like a feat of stage management, like carpentry, that they would make a big mechanism of a hell mouth, and they'd have, little devils run around and scare people. And just to see it happen to be amazing.
I'd love to go back in time and watch one of those.
Yeah, but the idea was it was meant to scare people, and then scaring leads to believing that there's something scary, leads to got to safeguard yourself.
Right.
Exactly what happened after The Exorcist came out. Probably scared a lot of people to go back to church,
Right.
But, joke's on them. I'm into that shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want a shirt that says that.
So it's fascinating how into all of this decadence and belief that there's also this constant like visual reminder of the alternative to going to heaven. Like you could play by the rules and get this, or eternal damnation and hellfire, you know?
Right.
Totally. Not even just the devil, but you kind of touched on it with like Catholic, exorcisms and like demons in terms of the connection between Catholicism and being spooky. Like, do demons come from anywhere else? Like, I feel like demons are almost like a strictly Catholic thing.
I mean, I guess in the way that we conceptualize them, there's certainly very similar things in Eastern cultures and religions. But yeah, as far as like, I feel like in other Western culture and in other Western mythologies, there's certainly like evil sort of creatures, but they're much more, what we think of as like monsters rather than they are spiritual beings who have some sort of wicked agenda.
Exactly. Yeah. I do think that demons are the scariest ghosts and creatures in horror movies. That to me, I find the scariest because of my upbringing. So I don't know if there's a correlation from there. I think there definitely is. If I just think about The Exorcist, we brought that up. That's deeply frightening to me. I thought the new Conjuring movies, they're all touching on this deep, like kind of Catholic fear of this demons that were warned about growing up. And that I have in that trip that I talked about going to the seminary, I shared a car with two priests that drove us there and heard the story of an actual exorcism.
Oh, I would have eaten that up. Oh my God.
Oh, I did eat it up, and it haunts me to this day. Yeah. And how he told it, my God, this guy's a genius. He should be a horror like storyteller, because what he did was just in this front seat. It was raining in the car. We're talking,
oh my God.
And then one of the kids in my car, I guess, just heard a rumor that he did an exorcism, and God bless this kid for just going, "Hey, Father, what's his name? I heard you did an exorcism." And the priest got all serious, and he's like, I don't want to, glamorize it. But there is evil in the world, and I was called upon this one house one time, and I said the rites over the woman she was casting. So textbook. And I was given the rites, and I felt this enormous pressure and energy and dark presence in the room, and then I was there for the night. And then he left it there, and no one followed up because we were all just like, "Shit, Father!" Like, that dude should write horror, because he just leaves you with it. Like, yeah, and I stayed the night, and I'm like, what happened the night? Like,
did you win?
You are leaving out the juicy details, Father.
For real. I can't really speak to I can't speak to other people's experience on this with like demons and the devil and all of. I think the devil is an incredibly powerful symbol that is present in a lot of ideologies, including Catholicism. And I think symbols are unbelievably powerful. I think they can manifest into reality depending on how much you believe in them and what you believe. I think this also speaks to, going back earlier in the episode, how I always towed that line of like, I'm Catholic, but I also live a very secular life. I never really believed in the devil.
Yeah.
Even when I was little, I never really believed in the devil. I never believed in hell. I never believed that people were going there.
Oh man, I definitely did. Oh man,
Yeah.
I'm still kind of spooked about it. I'm like, what if I'm wrong here? You know, like I'm taking a big gamble with my life here.
Hell as a symbol and as imagery, there's so much there, and there's so much that can be done with that, and in what it actually represents. And I think it can represent something very real, but personally, I do not believe it is a place that people go when they die. I don't think that is a thing. You know, I know some people do think that that's real. So like, I'm not trying to say like I'm right and you're wrong. Like nobody knows what happens when you die,
Right.
you know?
Well, and it splits the church even. I mean,
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
you know, theologians can't agree on like, is it right? Like, is the belief in hell, does that drive with everything else that we know about God? And everybody's split about that. And I feel like as I got older, my understanding of it, I don't think I ever really struggled believing in hell when I was younger. I think maybe like actually believing in demons and the devil, that just seems so much more fantastical that like I kind of wished that I could believe in that, but I just never saw any evidence of it in my life. You know, like I thought like, okay, if the demons are real, like I ought to know somebody that has been possessed. You know, like I needed to have firsthand accounts. But I feel like as I got older, my conception of hell became much more subtle, and I just kind of thought, if hell exists, then all it can be is just an absence of God and a disconnect from any source of hope or light or the people that you love.
Yes.
And I was like, and I don't know if that's a place or if that's like a state of being, but like whatever it is like, it's just a total absence. And I think part of what endeared me to the devil, which sounds awful, but I'm not going to say that that's not true. The sort of romantic idea of like, okay, even if we just thought of the devil as a character, whether a character or a being that actually exists, the idea of being somebody who has lived within the presence of God, like has actually been within the presence of God and been favored by God, and then to be removed from that and to have to live an existence removed from that has just always felt so sad to me and so heartbreaking. And so I feel like I've always kind of have a soft spot for Satan, because I'm just like, you have known the greatest of good and you threw that away, and now you never could have imagined what your existence would be like outside of that. And now that's all you have.
And it's also representative of understanding the wholeness of existence, right?
Right.
You know the ultimate good, and you also know the opposite. You recognize all of these layers and all of these pieces of existence. And yeah, no, I totally feel that.
And in a way that is sort of like, I guess, humanizes the devil, but also doesn't excuse his behaviors. Like, if I believed that was now beyond, I could never hope to attain that again, of course I would make sure that every other living thing never gets to have that thing that I can't have anymore. Of course I would be bent on the damnation of mankind, because I don't want them to get to enjoy this thing that I can't enjoy anymore.
Yeah, that's a hell of a motive.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in, as I said, like the devil, Satan as symbol, but I'm also very into the devil as a symbol of that which is, I guess, breaking free of dogmatic thinking, that which is breaking free of the norm.
Right, a much more sort of like Promethean, Miltonian Satan.
Like last year, Brian, you and I, we when we went to Salem, we went to the Satanic Temple.
Oh yeah.
And I remember you were like scared.
A little bit. Yeah, I was. I mean, because this is
hard not to be.
Yeah, right. You growing up Catholic, I went to the point wrong. I'm like, I'm gonna go inside the Satanic Temple. Oh shit! And then it turns out it was really rad in there. They had a fucking Degas in there. They had they had an actual Degas sketch. It was amazing.
Yeah, I remember you just being a little concerned about it or whatever. And I had more knowledge on the Satanic Temple and actually what they represent and what they actually do. Because I had watched that documentary, that Hail Satan documentary.
Right.
Yeah,
it's so
really
good. Everyone watch it. But yeah, like the Satanic Temple is very much they use Satan, use the devil as representative of something that is just ideas that are outside of what is considered like Christian doctrine, right? So they're, no one who's a part of the Satanic Temple is out here trying to like murder people or do anything violent or awful. They're just like, hey, there's more than one way to live your life. Like, I think the devil and Satan can really represent that concept as like someone that lives outside the norm. Lives outside of expectations, and something I will always get behind. I will always get behind living a life that is outside of dogmatic thinking. And so from a, I guess, intellectual perspective, if you're looking at the devil that way, like, then I definitely can attach to that concept and get on board with that. And that makes sense to me. Now, I do also understand that there are people that think the devil is like an actual being that like can affect people and like make people do awful things. I'm not here to say that you're wrong or anything, but that's just not how I see it. But that concept in and of itself, the idea of the devil being, being able to affect human beings and cause them to do horrible things is definitely terrifying. Like, definitely.
Yeah, I think what's more. It's so funny. I was talking to a friend about this today because we were talking about cults. Actually, she's watching that show, The Vow, on HBO. I thought, and we were talking about how cult leaders prey on people, and it's always when you're in a vulnerable state and you're looking for a sign and you're looking for an answer, you're looking for something to solve, something that's going wrong in your life. Sort of constantly thinking about the idea of selling your soul to the devil. I just always think that has to come to you in a moment of just abject vulnerability, and it's never going to be in a sort of like mustache twirling, like evil sort of way. It's going to sound beautiful, and it's going to sound like this is the greatest thing that's ever going to happen to you, and only good things can happen from here, and there's no negative thing to it. And like, look, you've been waiting for a sign all your life, and like, if me offering you this is not a sign, then I don't know what else you're waiting for. And if you say no to this now, you're going to think back on this moment, years from now or tomorrow or whatever, when you're miserable again, and you're going to think, why did I never take the opportunity to make my life better? And then you're going to think back to when I offered you this, and you're going to go, damn, actually it did, that did come to me. And I said no.
I'm so glad you brought up The Vow, because when we started this conversation about the devil, I was like, I don't believe in the devil, but if there is a devil, it's fucking Keith Raniere.
Yeah.
Like, fuck that guy.
Yeah. Gotta be how he works.
Like you brought up a while ago, just this idea of like maybe not the devil being like a thing, but maybe like the absence of something, like an absence of connection to God. That's how I feel about Keith Raniere, like the leader of the Nexium cult. I'm like, oh, he is just so unbelievably disconnected from God and humanity. So like, if there's a devil, he's a pretty good representation of it, in my opinion.
That should be a topic we talk about one of these episodes, is our favorite representations of the devil, or what we see as the devil. It comes in many forms,
Yeah.
Horns, Black Phillip, we got a lot of stuff.
Black Phillip, right.
Before we like wrap things up, there's still like a couple things we never even got to that I feel like I have to mention on the topic of like being Catholic and spooky. We briefly mentioned just bones, relics. Like Catholics love relics, love to save the finger bones of saints, or like shit like that. I've seen so much of that shit just on display in like famous churches. Just like, this is the finger of so and so saint or whatever. Like, what's spookier than bones? Like, literally, what is spookier than bones?
That's the title of the first song of the band Spooky Catholic Children.
What's spookier than bones?
than
1, 2, 3,
bones?
4. No.
What is spookier than bones? And then we talked about drinking the blood of Christ. So like
Oh.
blood is huge. Not just drinking blood, but like crying blood is a thing.
Yes, yeah.
Stigmata.
Blood, yes.
You're witnessing you're embodying the wounds of Christ. Yeah.
Well, in drinking blood, I know we didn't mention vampires yet, but just to plug vampires for a second,
Always
Yeah.
have to.
if Catholic theology is correct, then vampires ought to be able to drink consecrated wine at Mass and have that count as blood.
Right.
If transubstantiation is real and operates the way that we believe that it operates, then there's nothing that should prevent vampires from drinking that as if it were blood.
You just gave me an idea of a vampire that moonlights as a Catholic priest.
Yes, I've always yes,
supply of blood.
I've constantly thought about that. And what I love about that too is like there's also this sort of Catholic idea of like, even if you were a vampire, like you're not beyond redemption.
Yes.
You know, like there's still the possibility for like hope of reuniting with God, and like you're still communing with the best part of yourself. You know,
Isn't that like the opposite of the whole doctrine of vampires? Though you're eternally damned to walk forever.
right. But like then you're released. Like when Dracula is killed, right? Like this expression of peace comes over him, and they, Mina and Van Helsing and everybody, they feel like, oh, they've released him from this torment. So I mean, and probably he goes to hell or whatever, but maybe there's some part of him that gets there's some part of him that gets reunited.
Yeah, no, I really love the idea of the vampire being redeemed. Like I think that's something a lot of us vampire lovers want to see, like, because that's such an issue, like such a thing, a soul yearning in the vampire story of like.
And there's so much about like consent involved in terms of like how you became a vampire.
Yeah.
Like that's not really fair. If you like, I had no intention of being a vampire, but here I am.
I would love to see the story of a super Catholic vampire just like being.
I would be the super Catholic vampire. I'd be going to Mass all the time.
Like that, they never kill anyone. They're just always at Mass, like drinking the wine and like that. I love that. I love that concept. But no, I definitely, in the subject of blood, I've also been sipping red wine this evening.
Same. I also had a candle. Yeah.
Yeah, I immediately, it's like vampires. Like, obviously, like, who else drinks blood? Catholics and vampires. Like, that's who drinks blood. So, like, there's that. Yeah, the Stigmata, which there is a movie from the 90s called Stigmata.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So good. But the Stigmata is just horrifying. Like this concept of getting the wounds of Jesus Christ, like, and it's some kind of an honor, like, and you're getting the wounds in your hands, like the.
Oh yeah.
Or like when the Eucharist bleeds. I forget if there's a name for that.
I don't know.
But I feel like maybe like Padre Pio, who had Stigmata, also like performed Mass where like. In consecrating the host, like the host was reported to have like started bleeding.
Whoa.
Blood.
Yeah, which like what the hell is that about?
Bloody
Again, blood, more blood, more blood.
Yeah, lots of blood. Yeah, like I said, definitely stories of like crying blood. We've talked a lot about the Eucharist, which is 10,000% ritualized cannibalism. That's what that is.
Yeah, well,
and
right.
I like to pretend it's not, but that's what that is.
No, it's bread, but it's also the body, right? So it's cannibalism. No, it's bread. Oh yeah, but it's the body
Again,
right?
So
no, it's cannibalism. No, it's bread.
oh, so it's a human, so it's cannibalism. No, it's bread.
What don't you get about this?
Demons, Catholic exorcisms, undeniably horrifying.
Yep.
Eternal damnation and hellfire. That's
big bummer.
The whole thing. I also have on here stained glass. Stained glass is creepy.
Yeah, it's uncanny. It's kind of
beautiful. It's beautiful. I love stained glass. I adore stained glass. It's also creepy. Like it's both, right?
Yeah.
I think that's also something I wanted to mention too. Is all of this we're talking about how creepy Catholicism and stuff is, and like why growing up Catholic makes you spooky. That's not a bad thing.
No, I wouldn't trade it for the
Oh,
world.
hell yeah. I love my spooky life.
A thread on some website while I was researching, and it was like the question on the discussion thread was, what are some creepy facts about Catholicism? And then everyone on the discussion, it turned into a like, why Catholicism is right and why it's wrong. Like people brought up like, you know, fucked up shit about priests, which we're not going to get into. And like other people who were like Catholic, like were trying to defend Catholicism. And the whole thread was just people like fighting about whether Catholicism was right or wrong. And I was like, you guys missed the prompt. Like,
Right. That was not the part.
Yeah.
nothing to do with like what religion is right. It's like what makes Catholicism creepy. A lot of shit makes it creepy.
Yeah.
That is a fact. And nothing about this is saying, I don't think any of us are saying it's wrong to be Catholic or it's right to be Catholic. We're just saying
Yeah, not at
It's
all.
just our experience with it.
there's just some creepy shit about it.
Not only that it's creepy, they celebrate the creepy. I mean, we have days honoring the creepy. We
Yeah.
have paintings and statues that are like tableaus of straight up creepy, you know, like
The famous Festival of the Creepy.
the Festival of the Creepy. You know, that like we've merged All Souls Day and Halloween, basically, that they
Right.
you know, that the observance of death is saturated all throughout it, and not just death, like really theatrical tableaus of death. I mean, you have all the deaths of all the saints. You have, you know, John the Baptist had his head was beheaded and his head was served on a platter. You had Saint Joan of Arc burned at the. You know, these aren't like, oh yeah, and then they died of old age. You know, loving Jesus. You know, it's like no, these guys like we celebrate the worse you died, the better martyr you were, you know?
100%. So yeah, ultimately coming from three people who grew up Catholic, like we celebrate the creepy that comes from Catholicism in every way. Like I love how creepy Catholicism is. As we talked about, I love the omnipresent reminders of death. I love how comfortable I am with the topic of death, the bones and the blood and all of it. Resurrection, we got zombie Jesus, like that's creepy.
Zombie Jesus.
Zombie Jesus. So much of it is weird, but like weird is good. If we didn't grow up spooky Catholic children, I don't think this podcast would exist.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you,
That's
creepy.
probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ultimately, you know, my ritualistic, creepy religious upbringing, like it made me into an interesting, creepy adult. And
I think so too.
Wouldn't change it for anything. And there's just so many topics.
We've already been going an hour and a half, you know, and we could keep going.
Like I could talk for so much longer. Too.
I know. This is a bit a way of therapy too, just kind of going back and going, holy shit, look at that. You know? So I'm glad we got together and talked about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to kind of like round it out on is also like when this is part of your upbringing as a small child, as like a 4 and 5 year old, like you don't realize any of this is weird until you become an adult. It took me a long time to realize any of this was weird or creepy or unusual.
We're still unpacking stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I forgot to bring this up when we were on the subject of demons and demonic possession. There's that movie that I don't know what the state of it is, and maybe Brian, you can tell me, but Saint Maud.
Oh, yeah. That is coming out this year. It's supposed to come out this year, A24 movie about this young woman who basically, like, to a fanatical degree, believes that she is a vessel, I guess, for Christ. And it will go through a lot of the, I guess, flagellations that will come with it. I don't know too much more other than a really dope trailer.
Yeah, but what I think that it seems to be, the question, it seems to be entertaining. And, you know, I don't know, who knows if in the movie, like, maybe she's actually possessed, maybe she's possessed by something that is different than what she thinks it is. But I think that a question that has not been posed in movies that deal with possession before is, what if it felt good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because every other instance of, you know, demonic possession or whatever is so torturous. It's so violent to the person that is being possessed. And this is the first time that I thought, wait a minute, what if it felt like ecstasy? You know, like what if you were like having a religious spiritual experience, and whether the thing that is possessing you is good or bad, what if it felt great?
Well, I think that there's probably a lot of art. We talked about the ecstasy of Mary. You said the statue,
Saint Teresa.
Saint Teresa, that's what it is. We talk about a lot in church, the spirit moving through you and how good that feels.
Yeah.
But we never use the word possession attached to it. It's usually like a sinister thing.
Well, and I would think if I were the devil or if I were a demon and I were possessing someone, I would want them to take it as something good.
Yeah.
For as long as, regardless of what my agenda was going to be, like, that just seems like the easier way to do it. Like, if you're being tortured, like, then it's obvious that something wrong is going on with you.
Right.
But better to have it masquerade as, like, some sort of beautiful experience.
Have you tried this shit? This is great.
Right.
I think you also just like pointed to something that is really important to consider in terms of spiritual experiences is like, yeah, what if there isn't a difference between having some kind of a demonic possession and also having some kind of an angelic experience, right? Like,
right.
That's another thing I think with like spiritual experiences and stuff. Like, if you go into just the history of having experiences with angels, it's
right.
not.
I was going to say, we haven't even talked about angels yet.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned angels.
Guardian angels, none of that.
They're like horrifying.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
really weird and really creepy, and like having an experience being visited by an angel is not like, it's not a happy, chill time. It's an intense experience.
Yeah, everyone in the Bible who like witnesses an angel is spooked.
Yeah.
The first thing the angels always say is like, "Do not be afraid." Like they know, like I'm scary. Like every single time before even introducing themselves, they're just like, "Hold on, calm down,
take a breath.
Get a new pair of pants.
This is a lot.
Like
I have a million eyes. This is scary."
Which then, like, you think, okay, if angels are that freaky, and they're still with God, like, can you imagine being thrown out of heaven? Like, what are you now? Like,
Exactly.
How much more terrifying does that make demons?
And I think it speaks to the interesting nuance of it all. Is like, well, if having an angelic experience is supposed to be overwhelming and kind of terrifying, why is that so much different than having a demonic experience?
Right.
You know? So it's like, wait, are these forces working together? Is there more nuance at play here? Because yeah, like, because angelic experiences, both historically and contemporarily, like I've heard stories of people that, say they've had angelic experiences in present day. It's not chill. It is not something that that you would describe as just lovely. Like it's a very intense thing. So
yeah, and like also sort of like vaguely erotic.
Yes.
Like there's something sort of sexual about it.
Yeah, and
at least like that's how our human bodies like can make sense of whatever the experience is that's happening to us. Like we only have so many different functions to be working with.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think that like nuanced aspect of things is important to think about. Is like, is there really much of a difference between an angel and a demon? Like, what's actually, like that's the thing. Like,
you should watch Good Omens and you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because angels tend to have like a million eyes and like wings, and like they're not the cute little chubby babies that art tends to
cherubs
portray them as.
Right. I wonder if they ever miss each other. Like
The angels and demons?
yeah, like
Well, I do know.
I think you all should stop and go watch Good Omens.
best friend. Yeah. Clearly that's what this is.
I also feel like we don't need to get into it, but there's been multiple times throughout this entire episode that I've wanted to mention like the Da Vinci Code and like
like giving us an education.
Also, like every Catholic's experience of the Da Vinci Code when it came out, and like how you dealt with the controversy of it, and like did your church boycott the movie? Like so much about that.
Oh, yeah.
I still very much attribute the Da Vinci Code to why I ended up studying art history.
Oh, wow.
I do. Like, I read it when I was like, 14 or something?
Same, yeah.
And it definitely had an effect on me. And even though there are things from an art historian's perspective about that book that are completely incorrect or false, like
Right.
there are still bigger ideas at play that like got me, it was like the main character was a symbologist and he like,
Yeah,
and he's like an Indiana Jones,
exactly.
but like of art, I was like, yeah, like I want to do that. Yeah, just the Da Vinci Code. Also Angels and Demons, the prequel. Like, there's a lot of spooky Catholic shit in both of those books.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I love talking about this.
Yes.
This has been a great catharsis of kind of diving into why we're what we are, or maybe,
Yeah, definitely therapeutic. I hope other listeners out there that grew up Catholic have a similar experience because I definitely feel like there was some therapy that went down this evening.
I hope they also all have the experience of that one mass that was usually at night. That was
the rock and roll
music. I love the three of us all like that. That is just across the board. That just comes with the territory. That it's just obviously part of an American Catholic experience.
Yeah.
I hate it so much.
Oh gosh, I love it.
Give up on that? Like, are Catholics still trying to be contemporary, or did they just like
I don't
know.
I don't know.
I cannot tell you from experience as of recently. So.
I started going to mass like regularly, like right before the pandemic started. And I was like kind of enjoying it. Like I was enjoying like getting back into just sort of like the rhythm of it. It just felt comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, I guess never again.
God didn't want this.
Like I had I flirted with this again and here we are.
I would actually love someday in the future to just go to a Catholic mass with the two of you. I feel like that would be really fun.
Yes, it'd be so fun.
Let's go to mass together, you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Not there yet. Brian's not there yet.
No.
Ash Wednesday, Brian. Ash Wednesday. It's my favorite day.
I'm good.
Like Catholic New Year.
I want to get some fucking ashes on my forehead. Like, yes.
Yeah.
All right, we're wrapping this up here.
Yeah.
I feel like Brian hasn't quite come to terms with his Catholicism.
He's got time.
Very much have. I'm just never going back. That's where I've come to terms.
Well, that's the point. Like, it's a coming back after having healed from.
Like I said, I love churches. I love going. It's going into a mass that I'm like, this is the times that I have gone back. It's actually kind of triggering to go back because a lot of the messages that I hear from it, all I see are I guess kind of damaging. And so I love being around the art. I love going to the buildings and everything. It's the masses that I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever be like chill just sitting through again. Brian,
I have to send you this book because like,
I'm fascinated to read it. It's great.
The quote at the beginning of it is, "Religions commit suicide when they find their inspiration in dogma."
Mm-hmm.
And that's a quote from Alfred North Whitehead.
Yes.
Like that's the quote that starts the book.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just kind of speaking to that same idea, because I totally feel that, Brian. One of my most recent experiences in a Catholic church, it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, was actually I got to go to a mass at the Church of St. Francis in Assisi in Italy.
Wow, very cool.
It was very cool. He's buried underneath the church. I got to see his tomb, and the entire mass was in Italian. The art surrounding it is some of the oldest like Catholic art, like Giotto, like just some of the oldest shit, like the oldest Catholic art. And the entire mass was in Italian. Obviously I don't speak Italian. And so for me, that experience was just a completely beautiful spiritual experience. Like, and part of it was, probably like language barrier too. Like I wasn't getting the same messages that I would get in like an American Catholic church, but
right. Your focus was on different things.
Exactly. The fact that St. Francis, who, as I mentioned before, is a saint that I think just represents a lot of really beautiful things. You know, his tomb was right below me, and it was an incredibly beautiful experience and a very spiritual experience. And I had a really lovely Catholic experience that made me like happy and proud to be connected to Catholicism. And it seemed, you know, to me anyways, it was completely devoid of that dogmatic element. So those experiences are there.
It's also important to note that like that was also a Catholic experience in another country.
Yes.
Right? Like it wasn't an American Catholic experience, which is a little bit different, I think.
100%. Because then after the mass, like we just roamed around the city of Assisi, and I went to the smaller, tiny little church, which was actually where he grew up. And there's a story with St. Francis of Assisi where he was abused as a child. And there's a story where he was kept like trapped in like a
cell.
Yeah. He was like trapped in like a little cell, and that cell is still preserved today.
Wow.
So I saw that, and like it was a very intense experience of this actual like saint. Yeah. And it was in Italy, and it was like, so it was just this whole nother layer to, what it was to be a Catholic kid in the United States, you know. I guess I'm just saying, like, be open to experiences maybe outside of the ones that you've already experienced, because that was one of the most beautiful Catholic experiences I've had. And I'd love to go back to Assisi someday. It was a really magical day. It really was.
Let's go. Post-pandemic trip to Assisi.
Yeah. Oh my God, the three of us should totally go, and we'll podcast live.
But we'll stop at that pumpkin patch in Nebraska first.
And you guys can just leave me there. Okay.
On our
Thank
way
you.
to Assisi. Or maybe we have to hit it on the way back. That's how we get Brian to go to Assisi with us. Like, just come on, we're gonna stop.
I bet there's
Nebraska
so much else to see in
back.
Assisi that I would love to do.
We're gonna go to a pumpkin patch in Assisi. And by that, I mean a gelateria that has pumpkin flavored gelato.
So that was another, now I'm getting super like nostalgic. So another thing in Assisi, that night, like we went to sleep in our little like hotel hostel, and at night there was like a Catholic choir of like priests singing as we went to bed from like miles away.
Nice.
And we could just like hear them. It was like really, it was cool. It was like,
oh, I hate living in America.
Yeah, it was unlike anything you'd experience, in Midwest America, that's for sure. So
yeah, they don't play guitars at their masses. No tambourine.
They get the choir of priests out there just like every night singing the creepy Catholic. Because that's another thing. We didn't even mention that, the creepy Catholic music.
Oh, we definitely did. We talked about how, you never know the day the Lord will come. Let us rejoice and be glad. You know, that like we're always talking about in the tambourine, how excited we are.
That was a good rendition, Brian.
Did you like that? Because all these songs are drilled in my head that,
I can tell. There's some neural pathways that have been carved.
There definitely are. I guess I mean more, not even like the words. I mean more of like the like the creepy
chants. Yeah, the music's very spiritual. Yeah.
The chants, like we were just. I didn't even know what I was saying half the time. It's just like
which is the problem.
I love singing in Latin. That's my favorite thing to do.
Also. Latin, fundamentally creepy. They're like, come on, name a creepier language.
It's literally a dead language.
I know. Every time I hear Latin, I expect like a demon to pop up. Like, I feel like that is just.
Yeah.
The demon's just like, you rang? Gloria in excelsis? What?
Amazing.
Agnus Dei, here we are.
I love it. Catholics be creepy.
Catholics be creepy.
Thanks for joining us. We will catch you next week for another fun topic. Thank you, Connor, for joining us this time.
Thanks, Connor.
Oh, I was so happy to be here.
We're going to have you back. Definitely.
Yes, please.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for all our supporters again. We really love you and appreciate you. And we will catch you next time.
Bye.